If you've been stressing over what to eat to boost your fertility or feeling overwhelmed by all the mixed messages about what's good or bad for egg and sperm health, this episode is going to bring so much clarity. Today, I'm joined by Allison, a trained chef, registered dietitian, and the founder of Prep Dish, and we're diving into the best and worst foods for fertility. We're going to talk about how to actually enjoy nourishing meals without spending hours in the kitchen, how food stress impacts your hormones, and the simple shifts that you can make that will help support both egg and sperm quality, all without perfection or guilt. Feeling like this whole baby making journey is never going to work out? You've done it all, diet changes, supplements, tracking your cycle, and yet the pregnancy test is negative. It's so frustrating, and you're asking yourself, why isn't this happening for us? I'm Susan Gladstein, a holistic fertility coach and mom to 7, including 2 miracle babies after a vasectomy reversal, and I get it. Being told everything looks fine by doctors while still feeling stuck can leave you feeling hopeless and confused. On this podcast, I'll share practical, natural ways to support your fertility without all the overwhelm. Forget the everything's normal talk and the rush to fertility treatments. I'm here to show you a better way. If you're ready to take practical steps that fit with God's plan for your family, you're in the right place. I truly believe that you can have the baby you've been praying for. I'm excited to have Allison back with us today. She's a busy mom, a trained chef, and registered dietitian who totally gets how hard it can be to feed your family healthy meals when life already feels full. She's the founder of Prep Dish, a meal planning service that helps women eat well without spending hours in the kitchen. Whether you're gluten-free, paleo, keto, or just trying to get real food on the table, she makes it doable. She also hosts the Meal Prep Monday podcast and the Prep Dish YouTube channel. And I love how she's all about taking the stress out of mealtime. And today we're going to dig into something close to many of my listeners' heart, and that is how food choices can impact your egg and sperm quality and what to focus on or even avoid when you're trying to conceive. So, Allison, you've got this kind of unique combo of being a chef and a registered dietitian, which is kind of rare, I think. I don't know, maybe it's not, but what was your journey like in combining these two passions?
Well, gosh, it was something from the beginning. I always had a vision. So I went to culinary school in undergrad, and then grad school, I did dietetics. So they were kind of separated out in my schooling, but in my mind, I couldn't see how people separated them, right? Like, how are you going to get people to eat healthy if they don't enjoy what they're eating? And why spend all this time creating this delicious food if it's not going to help your body feel better and thrive? And so to me, it's just like they had to work together, even though a lot of times we see them as two different fields. To me, they are the same field, and they kind of have to be inherently. But yeah, so from the beginning, I've always sought to combine them. When I started out on my own, I started out as a personal chef, helping individual families eat healthy, delicious foods. I would go in to, I don't know, 4 to 7 clients a week and prep them with healthy, delicious foods for the week. But in doing that, I did that for a few years, and I finally realized I had this like system and process of getting meals on the table quicker. And I started writing out everything I was doing and figured out a way to bring that to, I guess you could say, the masses. And that's how Prep Dish was born almost 15 years ago, is, creating these recipes and meal plans that I, give online. And we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. So that's the short story of how I got here.
I love it. And it's so true because I think that well, first of all, there's a lot of noise, especially in the like world of fertility about what to eat, what not to eat. And it can be really overwhelming if you're trying to overhaul your diet so you can get pregnant. And, maybe like I didn't grow up in a household where we did any kind of meal prep. So that's something that I had to sort of learn later on when I was just exhausted from hitting the Chick-fil-A drive-through one too many times a night. and just trying to keep up with my older kids' schedule at the time. But what are some, because I know everybody here is like really honing in on foods that are going to help boost their fertility. And what are some things or foods that couples should really focus on if they're trying to conceive?
So I guess I'll start kind of big picture and then we can get, I'm sure people want more granular answers, so I'll give a little bit of that, but big picture, the most important thing is to try and eat just, I know you've heard it before, but that real food, just trying to get away from processed fruit foods, cooking meals at home, doing, vegetables and proteins, but as much as you can do kind of that whole real food, the better. The other thing I will say before I get into specific foods, an important piece and having also been through my own fertility journey, I know how hard this can sound, but the most important piece is to figure out how you can not only enjoy eating, but also the process of it. Because the more we stress, even if you have the picture perfect, never eating anything processed diet, if you go into your meals stressed and worried, that you're just setting yourself up to have issues. And so the more you can start from a place of, hey, I want to nourish my body with these healthy, tasty foods and, figure out, yes, I say like eat healthy, but okay, salmon's great. But if you hate it and you're gagging every time you eat it, that's not good for anyone, including your health or your egg health. So you've got to figure out, these healthy foods that I'm going to mention, which ones do you enjoy eating and how can you make the process enjoyable? Because there's just so much. And I get it, having gone through all the fertility stuff. It's, there's so much to worry and stress about, but being able to figure out a way to come into your eating habits and your meals in a calm way is kind of like overarching a more important thing than like, oh, are you having, iceberg lettuce or spinach? Like those sort of things we could get into. But I just want to start by saying, take a deep breath, do the best you can, and kind of be okay with that. And then work towards, small changes over time versus being so stressed of like, oh my goodness, I have to change this, and this. Because I think just being able to come at it as of a place of being more relaxed and looking at food as not the enemy, but looking at food as like, this is going to nourish my body. And maybe, hey, maybe tonight I'm going to have some ice cream and I'm really going to enjoy it versus anytime you're eating something being like feeling guilty about it and stressed about it. So that's kind of my first message that I want to get out there. And again, total empathy that, it's easier said than done, but something to consider first is like overall, how are you approaching food? Um, and then from there, specific foods, when I say real whole foods, looking at proteins and high quality proteins. So avoiding, again, it's all going to kind of come back to this theme of like avoiding the processed foods and doing more of the, like, instead of doing, turkey deli meat, let's do a whole roasted chicken. So just kind of like the basics. And then also when you look at vegetables, like making sure we're including vegetables in our meals. And again, it can be start with what you enjoy versus trying to fit things in just because, kale is a quote unquote superfood. But if you love arugula and you love arugula salads, then go that direction, So kind of finding this balance of going for the foods that are healthy, but also the ones that you can enjoy. I feel like I had something else to go on that tangent, but I think that's kind of the place to start is like looking at whole real foods in combination with what you enjoy.
Okay, first of all, I really appreciate you talking about the impact just stressing over food has, because
Mhm.
one of the things, I guess maybe it was a big aha moment for me when I was getting my health coach certification, was they were saying that like 75% of it isn't what you eat, but who you're being while you're eating. And so if you're eating in a rushed state or a stressed state, your body goes into that fight or flight mode. And when that happens, it slows down your digestion. So a lot of
Mm.
times you may not even be hungry if you're in that state of chaos constantly. But then just really slowing down and chewing your food so that you can actually digest it properly. And for me, as someone who struggled with digestion issues most of my life, that was like, huh, I didn't even like think or know about that. So in theory, I guess I always kind of knew what to eat, but how to eat was a whole other thing because I had all of these, food issues because I was like, I knew what to eat, but I was so hyper focused on doing it the right way that it was just a stressful thing. So I really appreciate the reminder and the just message that not stressing about what you're eating is far more important oftentimes than what you're eating. Because generally speaking, if you're in this boat, you probably have read every book or know kind of a baseline of what's out there. But even for me personally, is like even figuring out what foods, like some foods that are healthy, my body doesn't agree with them. And so, like, trying to force myself to eat foods that cause bloating and gas and like digestive problems because they're healthy was like, I just had to sort of like let that go. And I even had read this book about, it's kind of just like how the devil uses food because, like, and I think that the I come from sort of a weight loss background before I got into fertility and metabolism and all that. So a lot of my clientele were trying to lose weight. We kind of demonized food, and it really helped shift my perspective in seeing food as a gift to nourish my body and then eventually to nourish the life I was creating. And instead of just getting wrapped up on what I should or shouldn't eat, but really being focused on, man, this is really providing all these nutrients and I feel really good. And when I came from a place of gratitude, I can't even tell you, like, foods that I eat every single day tasted so much better coming from a place of gratitude. So I really, really love that sort of message and approach. But are there any foods or ingredients that you see sort of get in the way of conception, hormonal balance, just like impacts our fertility, but are so maybe just commonplace other than processed foods? Because we all know that those are bad.
Yeah, so there are a few. First, I will touch on something you mentioned, and like there's certain ones that are so controversial, and I think they're controversial because we're all different, right? And so things, I'll just touch on some of the big ones: gluten, dairy, grains. Some of those, it's going to depend on you and your body and how it handles those things, and that's something where it's good to work with someone one-on-one who can help you navigate that, help you. I'm a dietitian and I've worked with people that have helped me, keep a food log. And, I've been gluten-free for 10 years because my body can't handle it. But that doesn't mean everyone needs to be. And, the research on dairy. So I have also a nonprofit called Miscarriage Hope Desk. And I have gone so deep into the research trying to find out, like, what does it say about dairy? And my conclusion at the end of the day is it depends, right? It depends on you and how you can tolerate it. I actually am not under the belief that every single person needs to eliminate dairy. I think it can be healthy if you're doing whole fat, organic dairy, but also if you can't tolerate it, your body's going to let you know and you need to listen into that. So, there's not these like hard and fast rules. Now, one that I will say, and it's not always fun, but sugar in excess, just not one that's going to be good for fertility. That's kind of one where you can make a blanket statement. But again, going back to our previous statement, if you are going to have, it's a birthday, you're having cupcakes, or it's a summer evening and everyone's going out for ice cream. If you're going to have it, sit down, enjoy it, take deep breaths. Your body will, you know what I mean? Come at it from a place of like, okay, I want to enjoy this versus a place of guilt. And I do think there's this, and there's research to back it up too, but your body is going to process it better if you don't come at it from that place of guilt, like you were talking about. But yeah, definitely not, sugar is one that across the board is going to impact fertility if you go into heavy on that. Gosh, I'm trying to think of other just, and I mean, processed foods, the thing we keep coming back to, but there's just, and that, that just encompasses so many things. But if you can avoid the processed food, there's just so much in terms of, high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. And there's just a lot that you can avoid just by taking that entire big category out.
Well, and I appreciate also that you talk about the artificial sweeteners because for many years, so I always thought that I was, lactose intolerant and had all these digestive issues. And honestly, when I figured out the foods that were impacting me and I healed my gut intentionally, like I now can eat dairy with no issues. But it took probably 3 years of
Mhm.
active work to get to the point where I could go back to dairy. But I think about just the amount, even as a child, eating cereal for breakfast and milk, and just how sick I constantly, like every day, it was just like this, you know, fighting this histamine response that I was having because of my poor gut health back then, and even, into my late 30s, that I still like hadn't figured it out yet. It was a trial and error for sure. But I had issues with artificial sweeteners, but didn't realize that a lot of my digestive problems, my migraines, all were stemming from eating these quote unquote healthy foods because like I had blood sugar issues. So I was trying to combat that before exercise with protein bars, and all of them had like sugar alcohols or sucralose, and those were causing so much damage. But I just had chalked it up to like, well, that's just my system. And so I didn't
Mhm.
really know how bad I felt until I felt good. But even just reading, when I started reading the labels and realizing how many things that shouldn't have these artificial sweeteners had them, was
Mhm.
mind blowing to me. And it just got to where I was like, yeah, I don't feel like I want to crap my pants. So the answer is going to be no to that. Because my husband would go and pick something out, and I'm like, nope, I'm not eating that because it's got sucralose or it's got this or that. And so just being really mindful and understanding. I mean, even now, things like crickets are disguised in a lot of like packaged food. So if you're not reading labels, I think you should probably get in on that because it's kind of wild what they have in there. But I will say it's one thing to know what foods are, helpful for fertility, but it's another thing to actually eat them on a consistent basis. I know that that was my problem for a lot of years because I was just crazy busy, and I knew as a health coach, I knew what to eat. But what's your advice for someone who kind of just feels overwhelmed with trying to make all those fertility friendly meals happen?
Yeah, so this is what I started to allude to earlier of, it can be keep the meal simple in the beginning, right? Like, yes, you want things, again, chef background, taste is important, but something like, to me, like a roasted chicken thigh with salt and pepper can be delicious. Like, and then, adding I love roasted vegetables of any kind. So I know cauliflower, green beans, broccoli, asparagus, any of those things. If I roast it with olive oil and salt, I'm going to enjoy any of those. So kind of like pick and choose what you're going to enjoy to start. But remember, you can really keep things simple. Olive oil, salt, and pepper goes a really long way. And then from there, you can find some sauces and ways to add more flavor. And, maybe it's making a chimichurri, which sounds fancy, but it's really just some herbs and vinegar and olive oil in a blender. Make a batch of that at the beginning of the week and use it on your meals to add some flavor. So, again, it can be very simple and then add a few things for flavor, but try not to overdo it in the beginning and keep it realistic and know kind of what it takes for you to be, I don't know, create an appetizing meal, I should say.
Yeah, I think for me, dinner was always my sticking point as far as
Mhm.
like being busy when I got off of work, and, kids are starving and we had baseball practice or whatever. And so like I always needed quick and easy, but I didn't always have a lot of time in my weeks to prep. And so I would spend the extra money to have like pre-cut and washed vegetables, which for me in that season was like worth it. And I know that that's not in everybody's budget, but for me, like having fruits that were already cut up meant that I would eat them instead of just
Mhm.
them sitting in the
Oh,
fridge
I've done the
staring
pre-chop.
back at me.
I do the pre-chop broccoli because I'm like, throw it on a sheet pan, salt, pepper in the oven for 15 minutes. And I mean, still, half the price of going out to eat or less. And, I know I'm putting olive oil. I'm not putting canola oil. I'm not putting, adding, a lot of times they'll figure out ways to add sugar to vegetables that just doesn't need to be there. A vegetable, if roasted at a high temperature at the right amount of time, it has a natural sweetness to it that's enjoyable. So really leaning into that and just like the natural flavor that can come from these foods is important as well. And just, playing around with what you like. I think going back to your point of like, okay, if you know that dinner is your sticking point, to me, the key there then is sitting down at some point, either like Friday or Saturday, maybe even Monday morning, figuring out what your week is going to look like and writing down, like setting yourself up for success. Okay, what do we have going on? What's realistic? And writing that out. Once you've done that, it's much easier for everything to fall into place. But if you're waiting until dinner time, it's way too easy to be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have time. Let me call in takeout. Reality is, though, if you have time to wait for takeout, you probably have time to roast those pre-chopped, broccoli, do some roasted, chicken drumsticks or chicken wings or something, and or put together some hamburger patties or whatever it is. Like those things can be quick and easy, but it's so overwhelming if you wait until 5 o'clock to try and figure it out.
Yes. And for somebody who's never sort of meal prepped before, or maybe they tried and then they gave
Yes.
up because life happens, what would you say is maybe one small, non-intimidating first step that you'd recommend to them?
Yeah, so I would say either chopping vegetables at the beginning of the week, because then you can kind of have that pre-chopped, magic of like, okay, everything's chopped. And there's something to be said for maybe I have time to chop an onion, but if all I have to do is throw an onion into the saute pan, sometimes it makes a huge difference. Again, you're at the end of the day, you know yourself. I know myself. I know how much energy I have or don't have, am going to have. So chopping some vegetables at the beginning of the week is a good way to like make things easier. Another thing I like to do is mix up either some sauces or marinades, a balsamic vinaigrette. I love a balsamic vinaigrette because really easy. A lot of times balsamic vinegar, olive oil, maybe some salt and pepper, maybe some herbs, whisk, pure, get a little hand mixer, and then you can use that on salads. You can use it, drizzled over like a skirt steak. You can use it as a marinade for salmon. You can use it different ways throughout the week. Something like the chimichurri that I mentioned earlier, or a pesto, just like creating a nice, healthy sauce that you can use in different ways throughout the week can also help just set you up to then, okay, dinner, you can do the basics and then you have something to like add a little flavor to it.
Okay, all this talk about food is making me
I
hungry,
know.
but I will say that one of the things, so I have an air fryer and there's like mixed things on like toxins with the air fryers, but I also live in Arizona where it's hot most of the time. So the idea of like firing up the oven most of the year is just like forget about it. It's too hot. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of grilling and then I do a lot of vegetables in the air fryer. And so for years I didn't think that I liked zucchini because my
Hmm.
mom always served it from a can. And then when I found out about like grilling it or throwing it in the air fryer with some seasoning, it like totally changed everything. So if you're like me and there was like something that you had eaten in the past that was not your favorite, try it
Yes.
cooked a different way. Like, I mean, even my kids like love roasted broccoli and requested on the daily,
Mhm.
but like if you gave them like steamed broccoli, not a fan. So I think it's worth saying that you can kind of experiment. And in that sense, so I have a lot of like things that I just keep on hand that I can pick and choose when I'm in a pinch. So I do have some like frozen like cod or salmon that's pre-marinated that I get at Costco, and they take about 15 minutes in the air fryer. And so if I don't have anything else planned, I'll throw that in there and make some vegetables. So I always have vegetables always ready to go. What are some staples that you would recommend?
Yeah, well, some of it, again, I love how you're like, I know this is something I like. So I think it's one, figuring out some things you like. And that's something I do recommend too. If you're like, okay, I'm kind of new to all this, and we know my family likes roasted broccoli. Well, keep that in and then try out the other things. And so that way, if you make a new meal or a new recipe, the whole thing's not a fail. It's like, oh, we still have the roasted broccoli that we like. So find some things that you know your family enjoys. But yeah, I mean, it's really cycling through. So for proteins, I kind of like to look at a variety. Seafood, I know my family likes salmon, they like shrimp. I mean, my kids actually like scallops. Those are so darn expensive that that's like a real treat. But, we rotate through all of them. And then with pork, I know we like pork chops, but I also, and I have a bigger family, so I like to do like a pork roast or a chuck roast. And the nice thing about that is I can do it, the first night, and then the next night I can use it for tacos. And then the next night or like for lunch the next day, I can put it on top of a salad, or even the next morning with some eggs, I can use that as my protein. So I like big cuts of meat in either an instant pot or a crock pot, just because then I can get more use out of them, right? Like I make it once, but I can use it for multiple meals. And then it's like, okay, now I'm only kind of to your point, now I'm only needing to think of a few different sides for some of these other meals versus start from scratch. So I think sometimes that's a good way to look at it too.
That's all really great. And so for the woman who's like overwhelmed by their fertility journey because it's somewhat taken over their life, how do you think that even meal prep can just give them back a sense of control or rhythm to their weeks?
Well, I mean, there's a few things. One, when you're eating better, when you're feeding your body with more nourishing foods, your anxiety will go, like it can help with things like anxiety and stress and things like that just by eating healthier. One, mentally, you're doing best for your body, so you feel good, right? You have more confidence, but then it's literally doing things within your body that are going to help regulate your blood sugar and things like that. So you're going to feel better. So there's kind of this like cycle that happens that once you start, there's this cycle of, oh, I'm feeling better, I'm doing better, I'm more confident, and then you can kind of just continue on that path. And then, gosh, the other key piece to this is figuring, and we haven't talked about this as much as like figuring out how to get your partner involved as well. When it comes to fertility, it's both sides. And so, this whole thing of, okay, let's sit down, have a healthy family meal together. There's the connection piece. Then you might be more calm. Say a prayer before you eat. That's a nice way to like calm your body, give gratitude, like you were mentioning earlier, for the meal you're going to eat, and then come at it from a better place. And if you're both eating healthier, better tasting food, that's going to be better for the health of everyone. And if you have kids, it's a beautiful like family habit to get into. And if you don't, it's a great way to prepare for that for when you do have kids. I know in our house, that's something that's like one of my most important family values is sitting down to a family dinner, as much as possible. And so that's just a great habit to start for so many reasons.
I remember like back in the day, they used to have those commercials, anti-drug commercials about people sitting down and eating dinner together are less likely to, like their kids are less likely to do drugs. And I always grew up in a family where that's just what we did. So I was like, who doesn't eat together? Like I
Oh,
was so dumbfounded by that. And my kid's dad never ate meals as a family because his
uh-huh.
parents were always working and whatever. But like that just blew my mind because I'd always grown up that way. I was like, I didn't realize that people didn't. But that
Yep.
is something that, I have older kids and now younger kids, and that's something that we definitely try to prioritize, just that time together and connection. I love that. I do want to know more about Prep Dish because we've talked about meal planning and how it's, so valuable, but like maybe everything we've just talked about is like, yeah, that sounds great, but I need some help. There's a lot of resources online, which can also be overwhelming. So tell us how it's different than just grabbing, a meal plan online.
Yeah, so we have created like these are the meals. So it's funny, I didn't mention this in the beginning. I created Prep Dish 15 years ago. My oldest is 6, so I have younger kiddos. I will say now that I'm a mom, I rely on these plans in a way that I never did in the past. If I want meals to happen each week, I have to download my meal plan, So it's an organized grocery list and it's all done for you. We actually have a one-click button now where you can have groceries delivered to your house with just like a few clicks. So that's very exciting. That's a new feature we've recently added. And then we have meal prep instructions. So, hey, if you can spend an hour chopping some vegetables, mixing up some sauces, then on like Tuesday night when you're scrambling, you can just, everything's chopped. You just throw it in the oven and like add the sauce or whatever it is. That being said, if you don't want to do the meal prep, you can also just make the recipes as is, each night. But it just makes things simpler. Like you can look at it, it tells you like step by step, here's what you do this week to get your meals done. These are recipes that are quick and easy. We have multiple options. So super fast is just family friendly, easy meals. That's what we're doing at my house. But there is, a paleo, gluten-free option. There's a low carb, I will say for fertility, unless you have a very specific reason or, a doctor that's working with you on low carb. I usually don't recommend low carb for fertility purposes. If you're past that, then it can be a great option. So those are the plans that are offered. And yeah, just, making it easier, taking that decision making off of your plate and putting it onto ours and just being very intentional with, things that we talked about earlier, variety and ease and things my kids will eat, that sort of stuff.
And I will say, like, COVID brought a lot of craziness to the world, but like grocery delivery service is one of my most thankful.
Oh, I know.
I don't know if it's an invention of COVID, but it's something I use on the regular. And so I love that you have the ability to just throw things into the cart. And I will say for me personally, trying to shop with my 4-year-old is quite terrible because she wants to buy all the things. And then if I go when I'm hungry or snacky, like that's a whole other thing. So it really helps me. Like,
Yes.
yes, you're paying somebody to shop for you. And I always hear people say, like, oh, well, I don't get the best produce or whatever. I personally have not experienced that, but
I think
um,
it's gotten better too, because I will
yeah.
say in the beginning, I would get that. And now I feel like I have a better experience than I did 2 or 3 years ago.
For sure. But it's like one of the things that saves me so much time and hassle, and I get just what I need, not
Yes.
anything else. And because I use it on the weekly, usually
Yep.
all of my normal staples are just there to click and add, click and add.
Yep.
But I love so I will admit, like I've just recently got on Prep Dish, and I love that that feature is there. It makes it so easy, and also the emails that you get with just tips and tricks, kind of as you're going and navigating, are so valuable. And I understand that you're generously giving a free 2-week trial for our listeners, which is amazing. So where do they go for that, and how do they get started?
Yeah, so it's set up at prepdish.com/Susan. And if they, it's 2 weeks free, you get access to all the different plans I talked about. So you can try them out, see what they're like. If nothing else, go in there, try it out for 2 weeks, take some notes on how, we've structured our meal planning and our meal prep and get some ideas. But I'm hopeful that you'll love it so much that you'll want to stay on board and yeah, but I encourage people to check that out.
I appreciate that so much. And I will say I tend to be kind of a like boring eater. Like I generally eat the same things every day for breakfast just because it's easy and
Mhm.
it's one less thing I have to think about. And we have kind of a sort of standard rotation in our dinners. So I will say that this has given me this new inspiration, especially on like the fast family friendly stuff that
Mhm.
I'm loving it. So it's amazing. I appreciate that. And before we jump off today, is there anything else that you would want to share for those who are trying to conceive and just overwhelmed with all the fertility stuff that's out there?
Gosh, I think if I could say anything, it's kind of going back to what we said earlier, is it can be so much. So I just want you to know that I see you. Take a few deep breaths. It's all, and I don't know. I'm sending lots of love and hugs your way. I've been in those shoes, and I just send, a lot of love.
That's awesome. And tell us how we can find you, social media, your website, all of the things.
Yep. So Prep Dish, the website's Prep Dish, at Prep Dish on Instagram. The podcast is Meal Prep Monday. And I know I was on here before talking miscarriage hope desk, but if anyone is, interested in more of the fertility leaning stuff, I have a Substack for miscarriage hope desk and an Instagram account for that as well. So happy to connect in whatever way feels best for you.
I love it. Well, thanks again for being on the show again.
Yes.
You always have just a way to share love and light to so many people who are just wanting a baby like yesterday. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal. I hope you're feeling encouraged and more hopeful on your journey to growing your family. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra support. I absolutely love reading your reviews. They mean the world to me. Like, seriously, words of affirmation are my love language. So let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram at Conceiving After VR and join our Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal Facebook community for even more support and encouragement. I believe that God placed the desire for a child on your heart for a reason, and I'm grateful to walk alongside you in this season, to encourage you, and to help you find joy in the journey, trusting that His plan is greater than we could ever imagine.
Thanks for listening.